Hey, what's going on, guys? How we doing? Matt Antonelli here.
Hey guys, Juan here, and today we are going to look at Justin Verlander and his ability to sit into his back leg. Some people call it sitting into his hip, sitting into his glute, but the term sitting is typically used by most coaches nowadays, and we are going to look at his ability to do it, plus show you what it looks like to sit properly into your back leg. Now, Verlander is obviously one of the best pitchers in the entire game, but he had a couple years where he scuffled in the middle of his Tiger career. And if you look at the changes that he made towards the end of his Tiger days and then into his Astros days, you'll definitely see the difference. And a lot of it has to do with his deceleration patterns and then his initial move. So we can take a look at his decel patterns at the end as well. But let's talk about the ability to sit, because that's going to really take place and take part of that initial move that I just talked about. So let's get this into leg lift. Now we see within his leg lift, so just before he gets into the peak of his leg lift, he's already starting that descension down into the ground of his hip and back leg. Now one of the big keys here, if we get to the bottom of his delivery, which is probably around right there, and it's, first of all, how freakish is it that he gets that close to the ground with his spikes? I mean, his spike is damn near scraping the ground. Let's go to the next frame, right? Jeez Louise. It's actually like super impressive that he's able to understand his body to the point that he can get that low into the ground with his front leg. Now, let's go back to that back leg and sitting. Now, we see here, and this is where the term comes into play, that it almost feels like he's sitting his butt down compared to the beginning. Obviously, we're in a more vertical base. He gets down into that glute, and if there was a chair here, he'd almost be able to sit into it. So that's where the term comes from, the ability to sit. But there is such thing as sitting well into that back hip and into that back glute. Okay, so we're in that seated position. We are using more of our glutes. We're using more of our hamstrings, and we are using more of our back hip in here. So this is very little quad. It is a non-quad dominant move here, and we're using the majority of our back leg, the back side of our back leg. Now, key number one is having the entire foot into the ground. That heel is not popping up off of the ground. The entire foot is evenly distributed into the ground as he's pressing down into the ground and using his ground forces to his advantage within his delivery. This is going to really allow him to keep that knee, in his case, slightly behind that toe. But the biggest thing, like, we don't want that thing drifting harshly over our back toe. We want it slightly or definitely shin vertical behind our toe, right? So that's one of the big, like, little cues that you can think of when you're doing this. Now, another thing is look the act of the hip. Okay, not only is the back hip going down, but it's also kind of drifting back, like he's sitting back within that leg. Okay, so we get back to the bottom of that delivery. We see that his hips came back behind him and down at the same rate. On top of this, if we got a side view, he'd be going towards his target as well. So this is where the hardest thing of this move is that your back hip and your back glute has to feel like it's going down behind and towards your target all at once at the same rate. And that's by far the toughest thing about it in order to get yourself in this position, is the ability to do all three of those, right? Trying to sit behind you, going down, and then out towards your target all at the same rate. But he's able to do it. Now, this is going to take repetition for those of you who struggle with it. On top of that, a lot of body awareness and a lot of maybe mirror work or video work. Take video of yourself. There are drills that you can do. You can try to sit into a chair. There's a bunch of different things that you can do, but this is by far probably the hardest move that you can accomplish within the throw. Not many guys are able to get into this position well. Now, one of the key factors of being in this position is keeping that front foot out in front of your body. So if we see that front foot or front leg, so the front leg is jetting out right in front of his face, that's going to allow you to stay balanced. It's going to allow the body, even though we're drifting back with that back hip, it's not going to make you fall backwards, right? Having that leg and having that weight distributed out in front of your body, out in front of your face, is definitely going to help your body stay balanced throughout your delivery. And balance isn't necessarily getting to this point and having the ability to stop. If anything, I hate when guys have the ability to stop at the peak of their delivery. They should be drifting towards their catcher. Like your weight should be starting to distribute towards the inside part of your back foot and heel. So if I were to ask you to stop right here, you wouldn't have the ability to do that because you're starting to gain momentum right here. You're starting to gain this momentum towards the plate. Okay, so that's not balance. But what balance is the ability to control your body through space. That is balance. And sometimes you have to distribute your weight accordingly because of that. So if my hip and my back hip is starting to drift back, something needs to be in front of me so my body can stay balanced throughout my delivery and throughout space, right? And that's where the front leg is key to keeping it out in front of you. So that right here, this is what it looks like to sit into your back hip. This is what it looks like to sit into your glute. So if you ever hear a coach, hey, I need you to sit into your back hip, sit into your glute, sit into your back leg, like this is what it looks like. And if we were to get a side angle, you can see that a lot of the pressure is on the inside part of his leg as well, while that leg is staying externally rotated. But this is it. That's the position. Now, if we drift forward, I was going to talk about deceleration patterns, where Verlander had very poor decel patterns towards the middle of his Detroit Tiger career. So if we go towards his deceleration pattern. So deceleration patterns is basically anything that happens in the throwing zone and then after it. So the throwing zone, I categorize the throwing zone starting within these two frames. So as the arm is about to cross the head and out into pitch release. Now we see the big keys. If a pitcher is able to mirror his hands, right, his glove hand and his throwing hand, if we see here as his delivery, Verlander tucks right here. He's clearly tucking his glove into his chest, but as he's going into the throwing zone, he's able to allow his body to rotate properly. His right shoulder is ahead of his left at pitch release. He's continuing his rotation. He's not cutting his rotation short. He's allowing his body to travel, and he's allowing his energy to travel. In order to do that, I call it getting your glove out of the way. Like, get your glove out of the way so my throwing arm can be safe and my throwing arm can decelerate at a proper rate. Okay, so if my glove, so his glove is tucked into his chest. If his glove, in theory, if his glove were to stay there throughout his delivery and not get out of the way, so this is your glove getting out of the way, or your throwing hand is chasing your glove, or your throwing hand is following your glove, however way you want to say it. If my glove stays tucked right here in this position, like it's tucked in the middle of his chest, and it were to stay there throughout the entire delivery, your throwing arm would be decelerating prior to pitch release, which is obviously something we do not want. We want our arm to accelerate through pitch release and peak acceleration through that, and then we follow through efficiently and safely, which is what he's doing right here. And conversely, you don't want your throwing arm to follow through against your quad either, right? Throwing up against your quad can be damaging, just as damaging as if your glove was harshly tucked into your middle of the body throughout the finish of the throw. So all throwers out there, okay, you want to safely follow through. This is a safe follow through. I think the goal should always be, I'm trying to throw as hard as I can with the most command that I can, as safely as I can. Those should be your goals. It shouldn't be one or the other. Oh, I should have a lot of control or I should have a lot of velocity. It should be everything all put together into one. And that's what creates elite throwers. And having this understanding here of getting your glove out of the way, allowing your throwing hand to chase that glove throughout the delivery, this is going to help your arm accelerate through the throwing zone at a much more efficient rate as it would as if the glove were to remain tucked into the middle of the body, right? And this is where he, quote unquote, found another 2 to 3 miles an hour at the end of his Tigers career and at the beginning of his Astros career, right? Because he lost some velo, but he changed this. If you were to go back and look at Verlander during those years that he scuffled with the Tigers and go check out his mechanics, you would see that that glove stayed in the middle of his body and his arm was decelerating prior to pitch release. And that's why he was losing velocity, because on top of that, he was getting older and he was getting more innings put up onto his body. But now he's stronger, he has a better understanding of his mechanics, and he has a better understanding of what it is to move effectively and efficiently throughout his delivery to get as much energy into and applied to the ball as you possibly can. So I hope you liked the video. I hope it was very informative. If you have any questions, throw them down bottom. Smash that subscribe button. I'll see you guys later.